Mother Nature can be very threatening and deadly when it decides to turn itself against us, and we are left virtually powerless to stop the impending destruction. That being said, let's get into the 10 most deadly and extreme natural phenomena in the world. But before you do, welcome to our channel. Do subscribe, join our zoo community, like, and click the bell icon. 10. Volcanic eruptions. The term volcanoes was derived from the Roman god of fire, Vulcan. It isn't hard to imagine why, as they are a direct portal into the fiery mantle that exists just below the Earth's crust. You can think of volcanoes as a kind of safety valve letting out the gases and molten rock that come under massive pressure from the movement of tectonic plates. Some volcanoes will simply spew out lava and noxious gases indefinitely, while others bottle it all up. When this pressure builds up over hundreds or even thousands of years, something has to give, and when it does, it's bad. Perhaps the most infamous and disastrous eruption of a volcano in modern history was that of Krakatoa in Indonesia. When Krakatoa erupted in 1883, it was the loudest noise ever recorded and was heard over 3,000 miles. The power of the explosion was immense, releasing 4 times more energy than the most powerful nuclear weapon ever created. 9. Wildfires. Wildfires can occur anywhere where sufficient ignitable vegetation exists. All it takes is for it to be relatively dry and a source of ignition. This can be anything from volcanic eruptions, sparks from falling rocks, or even lightning. However, more often it is some form of human intervention that causes these fires, whether it is accidental or arson. Once they have started, wildfires can turn peaceful woodlands into a fiery hell on Earth, and can become virtually unstoppable as they travel at great speeds. Whilst in heavily forested areas, they move at a slow pace. This can quickly accelerate in open grasslands and even be even faster with a strong tailwind. What makes these fires exceptionally dangerous is their unpredictability. The fire front can travel forward as one expects, or it entirely switch directions. One of the truly mind-boggling features of forest fires is that they can influence the local weather. 8. Tsunamis. The tsunami is perhaps the most stereotypical natural disaster. The sea rises up into a giant wave which crashes into the coastline, obliterating everything in its path. In reality, tsunamis are slightly less dramatic than this, but are still just as disastrous when they strike. Rather than arriving as a gigantic wave and crashing into the shoreline, tsunamis tend to resemble an unstoppable incoming tide, which just keeps on rising and surging forward. It is often the trough of the wave which makes landfall first. This sucks the water out of the sea, leaving it bare, resulting in boats being stranded and sea creatures flapping around on the sand. This aspect makes the tsunamis so dangerous is their ability to cross oceans in the blink of an eye without losing any of their built-up force. Almost undetectable in the open ocean, these waves can travel incredibly fast. They are commonly triggered by underwater earthquakes. Tsunamis can wreak havoc and cause deaths thousands of miles away, on the flip side of the ocean. This was the case in the most of the deadliest tsunami of modern times. 7. Avalanches. Avalanches take place when loose snow and ice on a mountainside break off and crashes down the slope, carrying along with it rocks and other debris. There are several factors that contribute to the formation of an avalanche. For example, the slope must be the right steepness. Once all the force has piled up, all that is left is a trigger. Now, this is actually going to disappoint a lot of people, but the idea that loud noises start avalanches is actually nothing more than a myth. But it is a fact that over 90% of avalanche victims do kickstart the avalanche themselves. Once triggered, avalanches pick up speed alarmingly quickly. Some avalanches have been recorded at speeds of over 350 kilometers an hour. Every year, an average of 150 people are killed as a result of avalanches, but some years the cases are a lot worse. During the First World War, avalanches in the Italian Alps killed around 10,000 Italian and Austrian soldiers in a matter of days. However, the worst possible event took place in Peru in 1970. 6. Blizzards. A blizzard is usually defined as a severe snowstorm with high winds that last several hours, if not days. The dangers of blizzards are the decreased visibility caused by the snow being blown around, insanely low temperatures, and the fact that when the snow does settle, it forms deep drifts. Even momentarily being caught in a blizzard can be risky enough, as the extremely chilly wind is enough to lead to frostbite. Further exposure will result in hypothermia no matter how many layers of clothing you have on. The most obvious solution is to stay indoors, but this is easier said than done when gale force winds make it nearly impossible to see past the end of your nose. Most blizzard-related deaths are those who are caught out while driving. With snow drifts often reaching several meters in depth, cars can become buried with no way of getting out. Whilst this is a much better place to be in than the outside, the temperature inside will eventually begin to drop below the freezing point. 5. Heat waves. It might be a little surprising, but periods of hot weather is more of a threat to people's lives than periods of severely cold weather. The exact definition of a heat wave is quite vague and differs in different areas. For example, a heat wave in South Australia may require a temperature of more than 40 degrees Celsius for 3 days. However, a heat wave in much of Northern Europe is 10 degrees Celsius cooler. This displays the relative nature of heat waves and how the local infrastructure is set up to deal with heat. Another thing to be taken into consideration is humidity. Higher humidity can have the same negative impact on health as higher temperature. Heat becomes dangerous when the body is not able to significantly cool down, which can lead to a heat stroke. This particularly affects the young, old, as cooling requires significant cardiovascular effort. When the body stops regulating its temperature, its biochemical reactions are affected, and essential metabolic pathways controlling vital cellular operations break down, and the body is unable to defend itself. 4. Famine. It is no surprise that one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse is famine, for its starvation that has taken more lives in all of history than any other disaster ever. Since the beginning of time, mankind has been subject to the availability and scarcity of food. Starting from the 18th century, developments in farming methods has led to most of the developed world being able to provide more than sufficient food for its populations. Despite this, during the 20th century, it is said that about 70 million people died from famines all over the world. The unfortunate fact is that the world has more than enough food to feed itself. And whilst famines may be categorized as a natural process, the reason can often be linked back to the practices of mankind. Oftentimes, it happens that war that is responsible for this travesty. Other times, it is just political instability that can lead to a decrease in food availability. 3. Earthquakes. Earthquakes occur quite frequently as the Earth's great continental plates move against each other. In fact, there are around 1 million a year, of which 95% are only detectable by special equipments. An earthquake is caused by the release of the huge stresses that build up between the shifting tectonic plates. When they push together, eventually something lets loose, and the energy is released in the form of a shockwave that travels through the Earth's surface. The resulting effect is that the ground shakes very violently in some cases. This in itself is not particularly dangerous. What causes the sometimes enormous loss of life is the effect this has on man-made structures, with cities being leveled and fires starting as power lines and gas pipes rupture. Earthquakes also possess the ability to cause secondary disasters such as landslides, avalanches, and tsunamis. 2. Storms. Storms come in all forms and are referred to by different names, but they all have one thing in common: are extreme winds. Tornadoes are the most violent of these weather forms, with sustained speeds of over 480 kilometers an hour. Fortunately, these are too limited in their range and size to cause truly massive loss of life. The other types of storms are technically the same thing, but with different names according to their location. There have been loads of deadly storms over the years. However, Hurricane Katrina in 2008 was the most costly storm ever, resulting in damage of over $100 billion. 1. Floods. When you think about it, floods don't sound that bad. I mean, most of us can swim, right? So what are floods doing right here at number 1 on the list? Anyone who has ever experienced a flood might see it a bit differently. There are loads of causes and types of flooding, but it all leads to lots of water being where it shouldn't be. As you may know, the most common reason of flooding is excessive rain, although melting snow can also be a source of water. The most devastating form of flooding is a flash flood. As the name states, this is flooding that occurs rapidly, with streets being turned into rivers in minutes and barely any warning. Perhaps the main threat to people is in underestimating the dangers of these floods. And that concludes our list of the 10 most deadly and extreme natural phenomena in the world. Let us know in the comment section which one of these you would want to experience. Thank you for watching Life Hack Giraffe, and as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon, and we will see you next time.